And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel. Today we're taking a look at Star Trek missions. About 5 years ago, I played a small little game from WizKids called Fantasy Realms. I wasn't very interested in it. It was a little box with some generic fantasy artwork on, a little card game, but it was really a neat game. In this game, you had a hand of cards, you collected these cards, and at the end of the game, you scored points based on the combos of cards. And all you did during the game was draw, discard. That's it. And this is by the same designer and clearly based on that in the Star Trek universe. Now, I'm not a Star Trek fanatic. I'm a Star Trek enjoyer. So keep that in mind. There's a very strong possibility I might mispronounce some of the words in this because I don't know how everything's pronounced. But for the most part, I know enough. I know who Picard is and Spock, and I've watched many of the different shows. But this is a card game based on that, so I was pretty excited about it. Let's take a look. In this game, there are two decks of cards. There are the Galaxy cards, and there are the Mission cards. At the beginning of the game, you're going to have a handful of 5 Galaxy cards and 2 Mission cards. At the end of the game, you're going to take your hand, you're going to score it on a pad where you'll go through each card and score those cards, trying to get as many points as you possibly can. The cards themselves do not have any inherent value. Instead, you'll notice this is a holodeck 1. It's a location and it's a Federation card. This gives 8 points for each hologram and 2 points for each Federation personnel and captain. Alright, so how many holograms do I have? Okay, that's 1 hologram. And then I'm looking for Federation personnel and captains. So there's a Federation personnel. There's a Federation personnel. So this card is 12 points for me. The Traveler here is 10 points for Wesley Crusher and Engine Room. Well, I don't have either of those, so this one's worth 0 to me right now. Commander Bruce Maddox here is 5 for each android and hologram. So there's a hologram. I have no android, so he's just 5 points. Leah Brahms here is 9 if I have Geordie LaForge, which I don't have, Engine Room, which I don't have. If I have holodeck 1, 2, or a computer, she's plus 5 and counts as a hologram. Otherwise, she counts as a human. Oh, I guess she wasn't a hologram unless I had those. But I do have holodeck 1, so she is a hologram, and she's 5 points. I don't know why they didn't write human there. Well, anyway. This guy's 13 if I have 3 or more Federation cards having at least 3 different green icons on them. I have 3 Federation cards, but they do not have 3 different green icons, so he's worth nothing. Missions. This is 8 for each Betazoid and Vulcan, and each of computer and tricorder. Not looking so good. This is 9 for each of bridge, tractor beam, transporter, and medical. Okay, that's not looking so good either. So that's how a hand is scored, but I mean, obviously you're not scoring your initial hand. So what you can do in your turn, you can draw the top card of this deck. Add it to your hand. Ooh, William Riker. He gets for transporter, Deanna Troy, and away team. And then you discard one. Well, I don't really want him anyway, so I can discard him here. When someone else draws a card, they can draw one of the discards that are down here. So they could take this one instead, or they can take one. Oh, Engine Room, I want Engine Room, right? Because Engine Room works for several different cards. So I'm going to get rid of this guy here and add him to the discards, which are all in a pile face up. I could have discarded a mission card if I want to. I don't have to keep them, but you must always keep at least 1 mission card. You can draw mission cards, but then you draw 2 mission cards, and do machines have rights? Ooh, this hologram one looks good, and discard 2. I'll get rid of this Lure of Profit and the language barrier. And that's how you play. You're just going to keep going, drawing cards and adding them to your hand, and then discarding. So you draw 1 from here or from this, or you draw 2 from here and then discard 2. The game ends when there are 8 cards face up over here or 12 face up mission cards over there. At that point, everyone scores their hand, and whoever has the most is the winner. The game comes with a bunch of score sheets that are double-sided, so there's plenty of score sheets here. You're using 1 score sheet per game, just scoring each person's card. They have room for an 8th card because it's possible that you might have an extra card in your hand. The artwork is kind of like faded pictures. I don't mind that. It looks pretty cool. I really like the colors on the artwork, so that's good. The card quality is also good. I'm less impressed with the colors. Now, the captain, artifacts, locations, civilian, systems, they're different colors. Great. But many times this will say 8 for each, Betazoid, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That's blue, but that's Ferengi. That's Ferengi. That's human. That's human. That's Klingon. That's Vulcan. It's not so easy to see that. I found that there was a lot of different icons throughout the cards, and it just was not easy, to just quickly see the value of your hand. I found that to be a little bit of a problem. Other than that, everything fits nicely inside the box. The components, for the most part, are pretty good. Now, when it comes to Fantasy Realms, which is the game this is based on, this is not a reskinning of it. That's kind of what I thought it would be, and, well, probably what it should have been. But this is different because it has 2 decks of cards. Now, for the life of me, I don't know why it has 2 decks of cards. There are mission cards and then galaxy cards. Okay, but they both score you points. Yes, the galaxy cards are not a captain, not a personnel, but why? Why have to? That you added 2 rules to the game now. You can draw 2 cards from this deck and 1 from this deck, and you must always keep 1 mission card in your hand. Why? Why was that? Okay, so there's that. The game itself is not particularly complex, but it feels complex because you have to look at all these cards. And I have to say, okay, this card works only with Deanna Troi. Do I have Deanna Troi? No. And like that one card I showed you, it's a hologram if these 3 aren't on the board, and it's not a hologram, and that other card scoring me points for the hologram. So you look at everything. Now, at the end of the game, you score each card by itself. The original game, Fantasy Realms, has an app. You can actually type the cards in, and maybe this one will have that too. But this one, to me, is worse than Fantasy Realms in every way. The Star Trek thing, okay, so maybe you like that or not. For me, that's kind of a wash. But having 2 different decks of cards, just kind of a pain. They don't really mean that much differently. Having the things not easy to color code, I found that to be problematic. But the biggest change in this game from Fantasy Realms, and in Fantasy Realms, every card was worth a certain amount of points. Sometimes it was 0, sometimes it was 50, but here they have no amount of points. There's no amount of points at the top corner. There's no base. And I find that is much more difficult for people to make any kind of meaningful hand from. Because if I get a card in the original game, this is 20 points, and it's plus 10 if you have horses, and plus 10 if you have a sword. Okay, I look at that and go 20, 30, 40. Well, if I don't have those 2 things, it's at least worth 20. Here, every card is worthless unless you make the combos. And the combos may or may not happen. There are some cards which are more valuable than others, in my opinion, like the engine room. That works with a lot of different cards. So when that comes, I wouldn't, and after playing this game, I'll never discard it. Because even if it doesn't help me, it's definitely going to be helping somebody else. And I don't like when the game it just feels wonky. The original game was a little wonky in the scoring. There was a card that if you had this and another card, you got 100 points. But pulling it off was tricky. And everyone liked that card because of that. And I think this game, they're like, let's make all the cards like that. But for me and humans, rounding is a thing where you say, that's about worth this. That's about worth this. Here, I don't know what any card is particularly worth. I mean, I can look at it and go, well, that's plus 5 for each of these cards. So this could be 20, 30. I just feel like it's not as useful in that way. This also has the blank mechanism, which I didn't show you in the overview, where some cards blank other cards, which means it cancels everything on that card, or they are blanked unless you have a certain card. But I just found this to be a problem. Maybe if you're a Star Trek fan, like a big Star Trek fan, it will be exciting. But even, I just found it to be work every turn. I'm like looking at my hand going, all right, I'm drawing a card. All right, which cards do I want to keep? And the original game had that in it, but it felt like the perfect weight, the perfect length. This is the second game trying to remake Fantasy Realms, and the other one was Red Rising from Stonemaier Games, which I also thought added too much to the game. But I like that one better than this one. This is the worst of the lot so far. This felt like a bunch of people who loved Fantasy Realms went and like, let's add stuff to it. No, it's fine as is. I don't mind different cards. There's even an expansion for Fantasy Realms. When you add the Fantasy Realms any expansion, they're easier to play than this. This is just a muddled mess. And it's very possible for one or more players at the table at the end of the game to go, nothing matches anything else. I just wasn't able to get the combos. And that just isn't as fun, especially this one. It slows the game down because you draw a card and you're sitting there comparing it to all the other cards in your hand. Fantasy Realms just felt snappier. You might say, why do you keep comparing this to Fantasy Realms? Well, again, this is based on Fantasy Realms. And while this is probably a cooler theme, I would have been happy with a straight Star Trek re-theme of Fantasy Realms when they could have changed the point things around. This felt like they were trying to be too clever, and in the end, made a card game I don't want to play. Dice Tower Judgment, too complex for too little of a game.